Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Victorian Environment Friends Network online presentation. Ben Cullen presenting Finding Melbourne's Nature. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're all on. I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as traditional custodians and pay respects to their elders past and present. I acknowledge that this land was never ceded and that we can all pay the rent. The Victorian Environment Friends Network is a network for volunteers run by volunteers. We want to see a flourishing and biodiverse environment supported by all the friends and resources that it needs. Our aim is to inspire, connect, engage and empower individuals, groups and networks to become effective protectors and advocates for the natural environment. Check us out on our gorgeous new website or on our socials, Facebook and Instagram. We are really thrilled to have Ben here tonight to present. Just quickly, before I hand over to Ben, everyone's got their microphones on mute, which is great. Please be aware that we are recording this meeting to show to anyone who's missed out on tonight. Feel free to pop questions into the chat and we'll have some Q&A time after Ben's talk. And the lovely Carol Chalice here will be helping to moderate as well. So thank you so much, everyone, and welcome, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today and talking about something I haven't spoken about publicly before, which is really exciting for me. And I couldn't think of a better place to start talking about this project than with the VEFN, who I think are an absolutely great group. I've got a bit of a presentation to run through tonight, which is a bit of an example of some of the work that I've been doing. It's a bit of a continuing project, but I'm really looking forward to the chance to show you through this work that I've started, and you can hear all about where it's up to at the moment. I'll start sharing my presentation. I do want to acknowledge the Bunurong Bunurong people is the land where I'm coming in from at the moment, and pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. So I'll jump into my presentation and let me get started. If I can't see any chats, it's just because I'm going through this, but I'll periodically check in to see if there's any chats coming through as we go. But let's get started. First of all, let's see if we can go through. This project that I've been working on for the last almost a year now has been called Finding Melbourne's Nature. And it was set up with the concept that I wanted to create a space where we could acknowledge people who've been looking after conservation areas. We could understand the stories of those people, the species that are still occurring in Greater Melbourne, and also understand all the different intricacies and environmental factors that go into living in this space. So as we go through this, I'm going to talk through some of that work. Also, before I get started, I really want to give a huge and hugely sincere thank you to everyone who's taken part in this project. People have been involved in the past, and now we're going to have people involved in the future. It's still an ongoing project, as I mentioned. I really want to thank all those people who are listening to the Finding Melbourne Nature project. I've been putting out some audio podcasts so far, and I've been really overwhelmed and excited about how many people are listening to it. I want to thank all those people who care for nature. I mean, I just, from the bottom of my heart, this project more than anything has helped me understand the incredible people that exist in the network that we all live in, and we all care for this beautiful nature that occurs all around Greater Melbourne. And I want to give a massive thanks to the VEFN for all the work they do and creating a space where community can share things like this and celebrate the people who are involved in caring for nature around Greater Melbourne. About me, I really dislike this photo of myself, but I couldn't find anything else. And I have worked in conservation for over 20 years now. It's been my career and my passion to really work in this field, and I'm lucky that I've been able to spend so much time in this space. I have a huge passion for threatened species, urban conservation, and permanent protection, which has formed a lot of my work over many years. And beyond that, I'm a bushwalker, I'm a naturalist, I'm an ecologist, and I'm a massive nerd amongst that too. I not only have a huge passion for this, but I really enjoy the detail and all the things that make up the richness of the ecology that is right around Greater Melbourne. Part of this project started with a conundrum for myself when I was reading some historical documents about how Melbourne used to look. And one of those books is, or a document is called Bush Wanderings of a Naturalist. Notes of Field Sports and Fauna of Australia, Felix. It's done in 1861 and it's by Horace William Wheelwright. I don't know if a lot of people have read this, but this is an incredible document. Basically, it's a guy who was a gold miner for a period, and he was terrible at gold mining after coming over from England, where he was a barrister or a lawyer or something. He came over from England, tried to become a gold miner, was no good at that, and then decided rather than go home, he was going to spend a decade or so wandering around the Melbourne bushlands in the 1860s, and he was a naturalist, so he started taking notes of all the things that he saw. And when you read through this document, one of the most striking things that comes out of it is that he says, sort of in the Greater Melbourne area, the three most common animals in the bush are quolls, long-nosed potoroos, and bandicoots, which are three of our most endangered species that we now have in this space. And he also talks all this incredible stuff about there being magpie possums, which are greater gliders in the east of Melbourne, and all these things that are no longer around. And that got my mind thinking as to what would this look like now if we wrote it? If we wrote this book about what other species and things that have persisted in the landscape to this point, what would be hanging on? What would be a surprise in another 150 years or so as to what's persisting in the landscape, what's thriving, and what makes up the diversity that is around Greater Melbourne. So that was one of the seeds that really got me thinking about it. And I encourage anyone who's not familiar with this work to please check it out. So the idea also was formed through the loss of some heroes. There's people like Jeff Durham, who I knew for 20 years, who was obviously instrumental in this group. And when I went to his funeral, I was there thinking, you know, how incredible this person was and what they'd done to bring together the network, and people like Ed McNabb and Mick Dexter. And there was many more who passed away in the last 12 months or so. And that had a huge effect on me because these are people I'd had long conversations with and learnt so much from. And them not being around anymore made me realize how much we should pay respect to the people who are around and make sure we learn as much as we can while we can. And so I haven't just targeted people who I think are on the way out. I've targeted young people and everything. This isn't a project that's just capturing people who are in their in the later parts of their career. It's been very much about capturing all sorts of people to capture the stories about what ecology exists and why it's so important around us. And so I've done a lot of research into what species used to occur in the landscape. And then I came up with this crazy idea, and to this day it's silly, and I didn't even want to put it in this presentation, but I will anyway. It was that I said, okay, I've got 30 days of leave from work. I'm going to spend it interviewing 30 people. I'm going to reach out to some of my favorite conservationists and see how many of them fit into this crazy timeline I've got, and I'm going to record them. And when I record them, I'm going to write a book or a paper about this experience. And I'm going to capture those stories, and capture is probably not the right word. I'm going to learn from those people and hear their perspectives and see if I can create something roundabout that can talk about this. And I'm going to tackle all the different aspects of Melbourne ecology, and I'm going to pay respect to people along the way of doing that. It was such a big task and a really silly task in hindsight, to try and squeeze so much into a short period of time. But would you believe, out of the 30 days, I managed to get 25 people booked in. And I've since enjoyed the experience so much and learned from it that I've kept going. And now I'm up to 33 or something like that, with a whole bunch of people that are ready to go in the next coming weeks. So I've just sort of been waiting to line up. So it's been this amazing experience of going out and recording them. And so when I had this concept of got to record all these people, I had to think it out. So I had to make a plan. I was staring at maps and I was getting on the phone and calling anyone I could. And I had to think, what am I bringing to this? Am I curating a mixtape of my favorite conservation people? Am I sort of just creating a course of sorts where I learn all these different aspects from different people? And what am I bringing to this? How am I part of this experience, and how is this going to come out at the end? And I came up with all these ideas, and at first my concept was I'm just going to record it and then write it up at the end. But soon I realized, particularly once I started recording, that the audio itself was gold, and it was so important to hear it first person from the people who were saying it. There's no point me taking credit for any of their knowledge too. I really wanted people to hear that, and that's how I ended up making an accidental podcast, which I wasn't expecting to make. It just sort of came about by an absolute chance. So it was brilliant to hear it in sort of people's own cadences, you know, people's rhythms, people's language helped shape the stories that I got to hear. And that became so rich, and I'm still writing it up. It is a big part of it to write it up, and I'm passionate about that part. But I've released these audio recordings early because I think they start telling a story and help giving you that interest. And also it helps me set the next scene for what I'm going to record next. I also had to come up with rules of engagement, things to make sure that I respected everyone's knowledge and respected everyone through the process. So these are the people I've done so far, and it's been an absolute incredible experience. And you know, I probably won't go through the list entirely, but I've got some examples and that I'll talk through. And I would love to go through the list, and I don't value any experience more than the other because they were all just incredible. Like, everyone's different perspective brought a different thing. But one of the main concepts that I came up with in this process was I didn't want to record it in a studio. I didn't want to go sit in a room and do this. I wanted people to pick their favorite reserve. So I felt that that would bring comfort. It would bring a space we could learn from. It's an odd perspective because we're recording audio in a visual thing, you know, we're in a place, but we're recording audio. So I tried to describe as much as possible and learn from the space as much as possible. But through that experience, I really feel it was a great spot because it helps prompt, it helps for welcome nature interruptions to happen. You know, things happen that you don't sort of anticipate, and that helps set the scene. It helps build conversation, and it helps go on lovely tangents. And I've got to admit, this thing's full of tangents, and I'm full of tangents sometimes too. So I think that's all part of it. And so from everywhere, from, you know, my first one was Peter Wiltshire at Darabin Parklands, which I'll talk about shortly. And there's some that I'll release the audio of, and there's some that I'm just saving for the write-up. And sometimes because I recorded as much as I could, and I didn't want to say, hey, you might know me, you might not know me. In the next hour, you've got to be as profound as possible, and we're going to record it, and it's going to be a keepsake forever. I feel that's too much pressure. Like, we can't all be profound all the time. And even though I feel like everyone was, I really wanted to keep the mic running. And that created a problem for myself because I had so much data, but it also meant that I could really get to the comfort of just spending time with people, talking, forgetting the mics are on in the most positive way you can. And yeah, you can see right around Melbourne, I tried to let people pick as many sites as they want. I'd go wherever they wanted and spend as much time as they had. And whether it was because it got dark or whether it was because we had the next thing to do, I just really enjoyed it. Oh God, I spelled Braeside there for anyone who's noticing that. Braeside Park, Pinkerton Forest, I tried to spread right across the city. And like I said, there's a whole range of people that I haven't got to yet who have been booked in to do it and just had to fit within the timeline. Some I'm really excited about, and I wish I could say, to be honest. But yeah, from spending 8 hours with Dave Wanden at Corindurk and hearing his life story, I really wanted to create something that was beyond a soundbite. Because I think so often in science communications, we're often limited to a soundbite. You've got 2 sentences to sum up a project you've worked on for 8 years, and that's it. You've got no context of who the person is, how much of their life puts in it, their character of any sorts. They're these small sound bites, and I wanted to create something where you got to know the person, you got to know them from their own perspective. They could talk about whatever they wanted in the nature space, and they did it their own way. And that's what I really wanted. And we can go off in all sorts of different angles and learn different perspectives. And through that process, I really feel I got to learn so much, and I feel anyone who gets to listen will get to learn so much too. So we'll go through some examples, but here's just a few photos that I'll talk through, and whether I was up at Cockatoo, spotlighting at night, or in Edithvale wetlands looking at ants. Like, I never knew how much I didn't know about ants and how much I do care about ants when I learn about ants, sort of thing. So there's so much to learn. Westerfield Park, and with David Cameron looking at orchids, and Bruce Quinn here, where we spent 8 hours feeding helmeted honeyeaters, one of the rarest birds out there. We spent time just walking through, recording as we talked, noticing things, thinking of things, and letting the natural sound around us take part. As you can imagine, working in urban spaces, you might often come across sounds that might not be the most peaceful sounds. The truck changing gears as it drives past the reserve, or the annoying noisy miner that seems to just sit right at the edge of the microphone whenever you're trying to record something, which was very part of it. But I just wanted it to be what it is. I wanted it to be real and authentic. And I really feel that capturing that sound, although we're sometimes interrupted by sounds around us, is a snapshot in time as much as it can be. And the experiences that it set me off on was beautiful too, to go to all these places that some I knew and some I half knew and some I didn't know at all. And I'm sure it's like that for all of you when you go to these little reserves that you're like, oh, I've never been to that part, or I haven't been to that place. And then this new world opens up, all this knowledge to be able to gather as part of it, and learning from those people who have had profound effects in those places meant so much to me. And I just loved that so much. For example, Angela Foley here, who's the Merry Creek education manager, we were talking about education perspectives, and she, as part of her work when she works with kids, she actually paints things, and she decided to paint a she oak while she was telling me these stories on my hand sleeves. And I was out with Wendy Probert, and we looked at orchids all through the north of Melbourne, and we went driving through Sping, trying to find as many orchids as we can and talking about how orchids work and the importance of it. The great Don Saunders here, who is director of national parks for so long, talked me through how in the 60s and 70s he actually set up some of the parks about Melbourne and how that came about. So capturing these things are stories that I haven't been able to capture and heard in other spots. I purposely didn't do a lot of research, because I wanted to hear some of this firsthand. I wanted to be excited. I knew who the people were, but I wanted to just go along with the story and just find it out as it happened in the space. We've got Leon, who I think might be still joining us today, teaching me about hybridization at Leon Costner's at Langwarrin Flora and Fauna, which is a memory I'll have forever, because I learned so much that day, and he's an incredible teacher. In Braeside Park, we went deep in and found the huge river red gums that still persist in a hidden part of the reserve, and learned all about the changes that had happened through Judy's time at there. And I'll talk more about this one shortly, but that eel too. I never thought I'd see someone who has an eel, which is Asher and the Bainbridges, who can actually call their eel and tell it to come. The Asher Billings, and so it was incredible to see someone who could have a relationship with an eel, and all these experiences were sort of crammed into this timeline, and I was just blown away, and my head was teeming with all this stuff, and I was trying desperately to find a way to collate and make sure I didn't lose any of this beautiful knowledge that's out there, held by the most beautiful people, I've got to say, as well too. So I don't have a good map to show you. I still haven't worked out how I can best demonstrate this on the map, but if you jump online, you can actually see, this is on the findingmelbournesnature.com page, and you can zoom in and see where I've done the recording so far, and there's 32 or something like that. And they're each at these reserves where I've gone out with different people, and there's plenty of gaps, and some of those gaps I'm looking to fill really soon. And I ended up at the end of this process with, at the current stage of this process, where I've got over 100 gigabyte of data. So it's huge, all this raw audio. I've got over 100 hours, I think closer to 150 hours of raw data of people talking. And I've got 32 reserves that I've visited. Having that much data is really hard because I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to edit, because I have so much respect, particularly for all the people that I have done this project, that I don't want to cut a word out of it, you know, like everything is gold to me. I love every second of it, and trying to put it down into a concise, 30, 40, 1 hour podcast has been tremendously difficult. But at the same time, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go for a walk and say, you've got 1 hour to say everything you want to say. And so I created that for myself, but I'm happy with that problem. It is something that's hard for me to work through, and I haven't perfected it, but I've done my best to try and shrink down the stories a little bit so you can get a feel for that person and the knowledge that they're trying to deliver. And then I should jump back, because that's going to be a big jump. Then I finish this process and I go, okay, I've got to go back to work. The 30 days are finished. I'm going to spend a couple of nights, a week, for about 4 weeks, and I'm going to be able to edit all the audio down, and I'm going to be able to write the whole thing in about 6 months. So everything's going to be brilliant, and by March next year, I'm going to have released the podcast, all the episodes, and then I'm going to have written the thing as well. And I went, brilliant, Ben, you've really nailed this. Well done. Here we go. And I went back to work, and within a week or two of getting getting back to work, I looked down on one of the days that I was out doing a flora survey in the Otways at Johanna Beach, and I was admiring this view. This is, I think, 60 seconds before I was bitten by a tiger snake. I was standing on this cliff edge in a really remote part of the Otways and just looked down, and there was a tiger snake just repeatedly biting into my leg over and over. And as that happened, I was wearing gaiters, but I moved away because it seemed to be moving up the gaiter, and it chased me and it bit me through, underneath the gaiter, sorry. So then I was there, all these amazing series of events happened where the ambulance gets bogged, they can't get to me, the SES can't get to me, they have to change ambulances, all these incredible things happened where I had to just remain calm, stay in nature, and find peace from nature around me. It was a really difficult spot, and it took them 7 hours to eventually to get me to Geelong Hospital because there was no antivenin in Apollo Bay. So I went on this prolonged experience of getting bitten by a snake and then having to remain calm. And through that process, I drew a lot of comfort from nature, and I really drew a lot of experience in just taking stock of what was happening around me. So after 7 hours, I made it to Geelong Hospital, and after that, I got quite sick for a couple of weeks, and that really changed my timelines of doing this project dramatically, to which they've changed to this day. But that experience led to so many beautiful things happening into my life, and I'm absolutely grateful for it happening in a way, because it led to a series of things that have made for some really lovely nature experiences carrying on from that. And it wasn't until just a month or so ago that I actually wrote down the experience of that whole snake bite, and it's been published online with Australian Geographic, and it's in the most current edition of Australian Geographic if you want to grab it, because I've written the story about what happened and how I was able to think about nature as a way of calming my brain despite having an incident in nature. So if you feel like a read, check out the most recent Australian Geographic to read that story. It was lovely too, because they let me put it in my own words. They didn't change anything, and they were really comfortable through the experience. And plenty of botanists and things get a mention in that, so it's worth having a read. So after the snake bite, I didn't speak to many people other than Uncle Dave Wandon, who contacted me, but the next person who contacted me was Triple R, the radio station, and said, hey, do you want to do a nature show? And I was still in my sort of snake bite delirium at the time, and I just said, yeah, sure. And so I started this, not long after getting bitten, I was on the air doing this radio show every Sunday over summer, where I was talking about nature and getting all these guests to come in and be interviewed about nature. And that was a huge experience because I ended up utilizing a lot of people who I'd interviewed before in this project and other people to talk about how beautiful nature was. And it was cool because I was sort of healing at the time from the whole thing myself. And also I was able to get out there and get the message out to so many people about why we should care about nature and interview amazing science people in a space where they could feel comfortable and talk like that. So I had a great experience doing that. But then after all that subsided, I managed to see the snake again. I hadn't seen a tiger snake. I went looking for them everywhere, and eventually I was able to find one after going to French Island, Morning Peninsula National Park, trying to see if I could find a tiger snake. I eventually found one. And when I saw it, I felt absolutely calm, and it was a beautiful experience. So I was able to close that patch off, and then in that same moment, I was able to start actually releasing these podcast episodes, which I've been doing one per week for the last 11 weeks, and there's quite a few more to go, but I thought I'd give you a bit of an overall rundown of a few of the eps that are up at the moment, and then tell you a bit more about what's happening after that. But the first episode I released was the first one I recorded, and it was with Peter Wiltshire, who's been a ranger at Darebin Parklands for 40 years. And so if you listen to this episode, I barely speak in it. I just laugh pretty much. And I've since found out I had a goofy laugh. Starting recordings is something you don't experience. Like hearing your own voice is really horrible, but then other people hearing your voice and your laugh and then reminding you have a goofy laugh is also an awkward experience. But yeah, I didn't need to speak because this person just told a story pretty much complete over 6 hours, I think it was, and I've condensed it down to 40 minutes. But basically it's the story of how Darebin Parklands was once a quarry, and then it got used as a tip, and then it became a reserve, and now it has all these water treatment ponds. They've got a leachate problem, but they've used the ponds to create and clean that water and create a habitat for many species. So hearing his experience over 40 years of how he worked on that, absolutely incredible story to capture, and such a beautiful thing. Peter's now 65 and has had a huge impact and still working as a ranger, and a brilliant ranger too. It told such a great story, and I learned so much from that. And so I was often flying with that first recording, and I thought it would be great to honour it by making it the first one people would listen to. I also did one with Kylie Soanes. So we had a ranger perspective there. Kylie Soanes is an urban ecologist and a brilliant science communicator. Got to be one of the best if you haven't heard her. She's incredible. And I knew I couldn't do this project without her. And we went out and checked out the floating wetlands that she helped build and plan out for the Yarra Birrong out near Docklands. And so we went out to that site, walked up and down, looked at these things and recorded her in that space. And it was so good because people were coming up and recognizing the work she'd done or her and talking to her. And I kept one of those in as well because it shows how being in the place brings all sorts of characters and people as part of it. And she had some beautiful quotes and ideas and concepts that I'd never thought of before. She was saying, like, if we know there's not going to be a building in a city centre for 3 years that's going to take that long to rebuild, why don't you put in temporal habitats so we can keep a patchwork of things going for those 3 years and then move it to the next site that's about to get built? And some really great concepts of how to maintain urban ecology. Jacinta Humphrey was another one at Banyule Flats. That's a beautiful reserve if you haven't been. And Jacinta's this incredible speaker as well, and she's also talked all about urban ecology, and she had this great ideas about how do we keep birds in the landscape, and she's a brilliant birder. We went out looking for birds, and as we walked around she sort of talked about the concepts of how we can use ovals and spaces in urban areas, or the perimeters of ovals, to create shrubs that will create a habitat diversity that we need to maintain birds in urban areas. Love that stuff. God, it was so good. And you learn so much in these experiences. Then someone like David Cameron, who's a botanist, he was head of the Victorian Biodiversity Atlas for a huge amount of time. He's worked a career of over 40 years in botany. And we went to his favourite reserve, Professor's Hill. And it was this amazing story about, first of all, how he grew up with the skyhooks, which I thought was really cool, living in North Warrandyte there. And he hung out with the skyhooks guitarist and bassist, and they, lived at this and would go explore the bush as kids and try and camp and stuff. But then he gave me this incredible perspective of where he talked about how he started recording, and I was recording, he's talking about every moss layer, every plant, and this recording, and I'm sort of thinking while he's talking, like, how am I going to make this demonstrate the story that he's telling about this place? And then when we got to the top of the reserve, he folds out a map and explains how every single plant that he just mentioned were the ways that he was able to prove to council that this site was worth protecting. And then he used that as an argument to protect the exact reserve that we were on, and it was all going to get subdivided. And through all that understanding and knowledge, he'd been able to protect that site, and then his son went on to protect the next door property as well. And I mean, all these stories exist, and maybe some of us know one or two of them, but if you connect them all together, they become this network of incredible people who are doing incredible things. George Paris, who many of you may know, he was worked at Latrobe Uni Bundoora as the ranger for 36 years, and also managed Greswell Forest. And we went to Greswell Forest and walked around, and I hadn't been there before, and George's concepts were so big and broad, and thinking across the landscape and talking about how we shouldn't be ranking the most important bush by what it looks like now, but rather what we should be looking at is the potential of that landscape. Would that bush be incredible if you just remove the weeds? Thinking of patience and thinking of all the unique nature observations he'd made through his career. And once again, this knowledge is gold. And I think for anyone who's working in land management or is managing the backyard right through to managing a massive reserve or a landscape, these observations and this history is rich, it's valuable, and to make it accessible has been a passion of mine, to see if we can find a way that people can really access and understand this thing. Then there's different perspectives, like Darryl Akers, who is the Friends Group president, I believe, at Pinkerton Forest. And Darryl tells this great story of, just going out and looking after this patch of bushland. And it's a small group, the Pinkerton Forest Friends, but they do all this incredible work. The world moves on without knowing what Darryl and the group are doing out at Pinkerton Forest. But that is the incredible patch of forest, like of this grassy woodland that has been cleared from so much of Melbourne. And people like Darryl are caring for it and looking after it and making sure that this conservation asset is still in our landscape. And many of us are none the wiser, but we all benefit from it. And I found many people like that who I can think of no other, I don't know what synonym books or whatever I've got, but Soul to the Earth. Like, these are people going out and doing great things and are passionate about it and bringing us all along for that journey. Another type of perspective I got, and I haven't got too many of these, so don't worry, I won't go through every episode, but was Naomi Sana, who's a plant nerd, and she was this 19, 20-year-old who went on a walk along the Birrong Yarra River. She was walking up the river just as part of a photography project. She'd watched the movie Tracks and, read the book Tracks and loved it, and then tried to do her own thing, and she was a photographer. And when she finished her walk, which sort of ended past Warrandyte, she decided she'd go back to the place where she started at the mouth, which was Westgate Park, which was a big empty park at the time. And in that place, she then decided to start a friends group. And that friends group became Friends of Westgate Park, which is still running today. And amazing people like Janet Blytho and all those have been hugely involved over the years to make it the incredible place it is to this day. But that walk started a forest, that walk started an urban reserve and habitat and maintenance of species that have otherwise been lost out of the landscape. And so she hadn't been to the site for many years, and me and her caught up and went for a walk. And it was beautiful to see her reconnect with the site while telling her story. And hearing the birds around us, I love the sounds in that, because you're hearing birds that wouldn't be there otherwise if not for her initial efforts to start that stuff. So incredible story, and one that I think we all need to hear. And she went on she's in a career in horticulture and teaching about plants and knowing so much about plants. But many of these stories, which I'll talk about in a second, involve diverse skill sets, not necessarily just ecologists and things like that. There are people who come at this from so many different angles with so many different ways, and they all create and help nature. And I think that's what we need, a diversity of people doing a diversity of things to really create these amazing spaces. Then we have Kinjia Munkaramara, aquatic ecologist, and she's a Tiwi Rumbarana woman. Sorry, I might pronounce that wrong, and she'll correct me because she knows me well. And she went to Seaford Wetlands, and we looked at ants, and we talked all about how important ants are, and she's obsessed with ants, and she's a passionate ant lover, and how they are the ecosystem engineers around us, the architects of all the different land formations that we have, and the role they play, and their connection with geology and all these other things, which was absolutely fascinating. And dropping facts like that bull ants can live for 20 to 25 years, particular ones, and things like that. Each day, each time I'm going on one of these walks, I'm seeing a totally new perspective. And I'm passionate about sharing those perspectives so we can all sort of get a feel for all these different angles that we can look at nature for. And the real goal of the project has been to make people aware of our reserves. I'm doing it reserve by reserve, and when I write it, it'll be reserve chapter by reserve chapter. And I want to get as many of these reserves as I can to capture these stories and the amazing people that are part of it. I want to appreciate our heroes, people like Kauri here, who talked all about microbats and the importance and the difficulties of artificial light in affecting habitat corridors that function at the night and things like that. This project's all about, making people aware of our reserves, appreciating our heroes, and recording our stories. This is so lucky to have something where these people have been so kind to give up their time, to talk to me, to put up with my random questions and ill-prepared and sometimes poorly worded questions, and provide themselves and provide perspectives and laugh and tell me about their childhoods and how they got into nature, as well as the things that are still around us today. Knowing that perspective of who someone is and how that shaped their career in conservation, and that's why they're obsessed with bats or whatever it is part of the story and helps it more digestible, some of the information too, when you understand the character of the person and all the different aspects help tell the story from many different ways. So my learnings from this so far have been, and so far is the big thing because I'm still learning, has been that quiet people do incredible things. I think no better place would you know that than the Victorian Environment Friends Network, because you're basically a network of those people. And loud people do incredible things too, but there's a hell of a lot of quiet people who are just toiling out there doing the work for all of us without ever saying a word, and maybe they'd never get recognised in their whole career, and that even isn't a thing for them. But I feel if we can, it's lovely to just be able to tilt the hat, acknowledge the hard work that goes into it and the incredible people that have helped shaped the places around us and all the beautiful places that we have to enjoy because of someone who wrote a letter to the council or pulled hand weeding out grasses out of their patch so we can have a beautiful area. Lifetimes of work that have been done to support all of us without many of us even knowing, and we sort of can potentially take this for granted, and my project doesn't solve that problem at all, but all it is just a little step towards acknowledging who we can, learning from those who've done it before us, and and sharing what is important to all of us along that way. My other learnings were legends walk among us. Even just seeing some of the names that are in this talk that we're doing here, I can see, I'm just going, wow, there's incredible people who've done awesome things, and I'm so happy to be sharing their stories or sharing space with them because they've done awesome things. And there are new places around you that you don't even know about. I can guarantee you there's a reserve near you that you haven't visited. And I hope this project encourages people to go check out, look at the map and go, what is that little reserve over there? I might go suss it out, because you might find a lifetime of joy or of servitude or whatever if you find something close to you. There are things that you can do, whatever your skills. It doesn't... to work on conservation, we need accountants, we need people who can pull grasses, we need people who are strategic thinkers, we need people who read field guides every night. We need everything. And I think no matter who you are, whatever your abilities are, whatever your times are, there's something you can do that can make a huge impact. I've learned you never stop learning, and I think, yeah, that old adage about the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know has just been hammered into me through this project, if nothing else. Storytelling takes many forms. When I first recorded one of the First Nations people, Renee, who's a traditional owner, she said, make sure when you do this project that you use a self-determination approach. Let everyone take it from their own angle. Let everyone speak their own way and just go along with it from there. Genius. The project wouldn't be what it would be without that. There's a nature that some of us have, including myself at the start, to say, okay, everything's going to fit in a box, everything's going to be 35 minutes, everyone's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And I'm so much richer for not trying to force things. And I think we all are if we take a step like that. And I'm still learning. You never stop learning. I'm still learning of things I should have done different, or things I could do different in the future. And I like that. Storytelling takes many forms. Yep. Common names, agencies, and themes. You know, people like the field nats keep coming up. Similar people like, you know, Leon, Cam Beardsill, all these incredible names that keep coming up, that pop up in people's stories. When I allowed people to give shout outs to people who've helped them along the way. And that allowed for them to sort of say, oh, you know who helped me? So-and-so, or this person. And you go, that's great. We should be able to have a space where you can shout out someone who helps you in your career. God knows there's been enough of them. And the final location really equals comfort. I felt that creating a space in their choice of their reserve meant that they felt more comfortable to talk about what they wanted to talk about in the way they wanted to talk about. And of course, back to Asher Billings and her family, eels can be pets. That's totally new to me. I didn't realize you could summons an eel and that you could have a relationship with an eel like that. And it's beautiful to see all the different intricate relationships people have with nature and all the forms that takes, and people calling birds in and all sorts of things that I got to see while I was traveling around and still get to see. What's coming up next is there's some upcoming episodes that I'm really excited about. I've only released 11 and I've got so many more to come. So I'm really excited for the ones that are about to come out. So they come out once a week, not always on the same day, depending on how much work I've got. This one's running late for this week, if anyone's a listener. Yeah, and I have more recordings to do with people, and I'm always open, and I'm getting constant correspondence of where should I go. People saying, hey, you should speak to so-and-so, you should go to this site. And I'm loving that response. I'm loving that feedback. I'm surprised how many people are listening. In my thoughts, I never thought that this sort of niche topic would have such a big interest. So I'm really excited at that. And I think the one thing I struggled with at the start was people sort of saying, you should speak to so-and-so, and you'd speak to so-and-so, and they'd say, oh no, you've got to speak to they're even better than me. And it sort of goes around the world. I sort of think you don't have to be the best ultimate person for this thing of the reserve, just whoever you are, and everyone brings their best, and you learn so much from that along the way. If anyone wants to listen to this, it's on all the streaming devices. It's totally free. No one pays for this project or anything. This is just an absolute thing that I've put together It's also available on findingmelbournesnature.com. You can scan the screen if that's any helpful to you, and listen to the other episodes. I've really enjoyed the experience, and the writing is happening at the moment. So after getting my snake story out of the way, I've gotten deep into the writing of this project, and I'm really looking forward to thinking back to the original reasons why I started this project and why I need to make it what it is now. And that's it for the end of my presentation. I wish I could talk more about the different experiences I had. I could literally do a presentation of talking about every single person and how I learned so much from each of them. But yeah, thank you for your time, and I really appreciated the chance to. This is effectively the launch, I'm going to say, because I haven't talked about it publicly before. But yeah, I've really appreciated it. I can read through some of these questions if there are any.
Bravo. Thank you, Ben. Yes, please. That was so inspiring. Your enthusiasm is so infectious. My cheeks are hurting from grinning so much. I'm sure everyone's the same. I'm feeling really inspired. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for sharing, and we're very pleased as punch to be the official launch. Then that's lovely. Yeah, there's a couple of questions in there, and folks, please do feel free to pop your hand up or ask a question as well.
Oh, if I spelled George's name wrong somewhere, George, I formally apologise. Yeah, sorry about that. Bracelet. Oh, yeah, sorry. Someone has picked up the spelling. Yeah, spelling. Sorry about that. Yes, that is the article. If anyone wants to check it out. And thank you for all these comments that are coming through. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Dave Cameron's episode has been particularly popular, particularly connecting with many of his students, to the point where I've been able to convince him that he might be the first one to do a part 2 as well, because although we captured a lot, there's still always a lot more for David to teach us, which is great. And it doesn't, what length can jumping jack? That's a good question. I'm not sure, Seth. It's a really good question. I am happy to take that one on notice and send it to the friends group for next time, because I'll ask Kinjia, because she seems to be able to answer any question relating to ants and insects that I can think of. Any other questions?
Someone did have their hand up, but maybe it's gone.
Oh,
no,
yes.
Looks like it's gone. Oh no, there we go. Margaret.
Hey, Margaret. I think you might be on mute.
Just go.
Sorry.
You're right.
Yeah, is that better? Yeah. I'm secretary of the Friends of Braeside Park, so I've had insider knowledge, but one of my interests as a long-term volunteer of over 40 years is how do we get the young people, that is under probably 45, 50, to remain interested and get them involved to assist in passing the knowledge on, and how do we store it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I'm still in that category myself for a little bit longer, but I really think that it's finding different ways of interpretation. It's finding different gateways. There's people like Clancy who's doing the bee stuff at the moment, and he seems to be getting a tremendous support. If Coexist, the planting group for 18 to 35-year-olds, is now bringing a whole range of young people out to do planting days where they're out there. There's little schisms. There needs to be bigger things, in my opinion, and it's about finding the right language to reach those people. I don't think I speak it, definitely not. But I think there are people out there who can interpret and build communities from that. We're seeing things that are really positive, and I've got all the hope in the world that there's going to be voices in the community that will help engage those people. But yeah, I think it's a question we all need to think about. Urban gorillas, and it's another one that's come up. Good point. I've been along to one of their planting days, and yeah, urban gorillas coexist. Yeah, some of the social media, Clancy and others have really been Jacoby teaching stuff as well. there's some real great people in the community who are bringing those voices in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That's a great thing. Sandra's asked, Thorn, have you thought of visiting any reserves in the west of Melbourne? I definitely have, and I'm paranoid about offending the West, because I think the West often gets left out, and the West has some of our most threatened species and communities, and is pulling the weight for a lot of Greater Melbourne. So yeah, it's been a focus of mine. I just did Newport Lakes last weekend with out there with Dominique Hess, and a Western treatment plant. I'm just locking in the person I want to do less Western treatment plant with, but there'll be more than that. I'm really keen to explore many of those Western reserves, and that's some of the stuff that I've got in the tank, so to speak, that I'm just organising at the moment. But God, I love the West, and I see its beauty, and I know how important it is to all of us, so for sure. Western treatment plant Ramsar, yeah, I'm really interested in Ramsar stuff. I'm so interested in Ramsar stuff, and this is a story for another day, that I actually went to Ramsar, the actual town, to see where the convention was signed many years ago. So I'm super passionate about anything Ramsar related. Oh, that's lovely, George. George explored Braeside. I'm very happy to hear that, George. And George, the amount of feedback that I've been getting over the last week since I put your episode out has been incredible. And people once again asking all these follow-up questions, so it's really exciting to see it happening. Organ pipes, we have to go there for sure. I totally agree, and the group there is incredible, like still bringing in new people to this day and telling stories. Yeah, I'm going to check the platypus in the Werribee River, and yeah, now thousands of them. Yes. Were there any species that you didn't expect to see in Newport Lakes? I mean, Newport Lakes is a strange place. Its story runs very much parallel to, in my head, or in this project, so to speak, to Darebin Parklands, which was also a sort of bluestone. I don't know if Leon will probably know better. Leon will know better than me, but if they definitely quarried bluestone out of Newport Lakes. I'm not sure what they're quarrying out of Darebin Parklands, but the seeing that become a quarry, then turning into a tip, and then a reserve again, they sort of share that cycle story and similar timelines in their creation. But as far as species, I think what was really cool was just seeing the bird life there. I love seeing. I've never seen so many grebes in the west of Melbourne, other than the treatment plant, and it was just stunning to see the water and everything that was around there. And I'll go and spend a lot more time there from now on, because I think there's a lot more treasures to find. Point Cook, yeah, George, yeah, I agree. Cheetham Wetlands. I've got to go out west. I think if we ever meet again, if this forum ever starts again, I'm going to be telling you about the journeys of the West. And the other thing I didn't mention is, like, what is Melbourne? When I started this project, I'm like, where does it start and stop? Like, that's such a hard question for me to even answer. And I haven't. I've just drawn this boundary of my own as I've gone around. And I think that's not important for this. It's more about the collective space and people doing things. And I would like to expand if I can get through this. Yeah. Merlin Bird App, a lot recently using the sound ID is fantastic. I agree, Brock, and good on you, mate, because that is absolutely shaping the data that we're going to have in the future. And all that work is the stuff that we use to determine what species are where. I know I'm a bit of a species nerd, and I like going back through historical records when I can't sleep late at night, figuring out what species used to be in an area, then going back and thinking why they might not be there, or seeing if they still are there. So collecting data like you're doing there is creating a story for the future, as well as something that we can look at now. And I'm appreciating all these ideas. Jawbone, yep, Jawbone, I was there just the other day. I love it. Yeah, wonderful place. And please feel free to email me any thoughts too, if you have an afterthought, if you think of anything, if you've got an idea about this project. I'm all up for it. I love the feedback and I love hearing from all the stuff that people are doing, and I've loved this experience so much. And it's been an absolute labour of pleasure, and I continue to learn from the experience and be humbled by all the incredible people that are in the space of conservation around Melbourne.
Ben,
Leon.
thank you for the presentation and the great job you've been doing. I wonder how you feel about somebody doing an interview with you on your background prior to this project.
Yeah, I've wondered about that too. I've thought about it because it does feel like I'm crying sometimes when I ask everyone's life stories, but I don't give my own. And I'm very open to it because yeah, my story is very much one that's been sort of wandering through reserves, trying to understand the landscape around me, and learning from people like yourself, Leon, who I think we can all owe our respects to, because when I say I looked at species records and things, that includes, you can find on the shelf there, your book and so forth. So yeah, I'm always open to being interviewed myself, but I feel like I'm not quite worthy of the people to be in the line of names that I've been interviewing at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, David Cameron. Are you here, David? Brilliant.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I just thought I'd expand for a second on Sandra Thorne's comment, which you already responded to, saying, have you thought of visiting any reserves in the west of Melbourne? Now, when you went through the screen shot of me on Professor's Hill, you had my map that I laid out, which some people might have noticed. It was actually a map of the whole of the Melbourne region. One version of that map had every quadrant ever taken by anyone. I was one of the botanists doing quadrant survey right across the Melbourne region for what was then a different department name, but still the same department. And the Melbourne region report ended up identifying a vast number of plant communities and sub-communities based on quadrant data that was then analysed. And that beautiful map that I showed you, that was showing all remaining remnant patches of native vegetation throughout the Melbourne region, and colour-coded to each of the different plant floristic communities, and then all columns on the map showing the sub-communities and the floristic species compositions. Now, what I really wanted to just comment on was that in the west of Melbourne and the northwest, there was a pink-coloured polygons for every remnant bit of the original grasslands, and some of them were actually grassy woodlands. Hard to tell these days exactly what did or didn't have overstory river red gums. But the point I want to make is, at the time that I was with a colleague doing the survey work across that part of Melbourne, there were quite a few of those mapped areas of remnant grassland or grassy woodland, which today, only this few years later, because that work was done at the end of the 1980s and that map prepared around 1990, about half of those areas have now gone. They've gone west, very literally. They're not just west of Melbourne, as Sandra says, have you thought of looking at areas west of Melbourne? I can't underscore how important it is for people to get to know what's left, whether they're in reserves or they're just bits of vacant paddock that still have important remnant species. On one occasion, I was the guide for David Bellamy going out to look at a particular area that was called the William Angliss. Well, it was a piece of land that had once been just land for agistment of stock waiting to go into abattoirs, but it happened to retain an enormous diversity of native species. And it's so important that we take account of what to most people's eye just looks like another paddock, another area of grassland. But with botanical skill, you can distinguish the native grasses from the exotic, the remaining orchids, of which there are plenty of important orchids. Sunshine diurus is one tragic example of a species that in that sort of habitat almost went extinct, and there's attempts to reintroduce it and translocate it and cultivate it. There's a whole science behind that. And so I just can't underscore more that Sandra's comment, as you said, look for some of those grasslands, whether they're reserved or not doesn't matter. Go to them now, because I can guarantee, you know, from 1990 to 2026, give another span of that time, I'm guessing another half of those will have gone under the developmental hammer, will have been bulldozed, will have been turned into industrial land, housing, whatever. We need those places, we need that land, but we also need to cherish what's left of our grassland reserves. So that's just the comment I wanted to make, and illustrating it using that vegetation map dated 1990. That's now a historic document, because it shows you what was there only 35 years ago.
Well, it's a brilliant comment, David. And like I said, the feedback and the amount of listeners that your episode got was incredible. And many people saying, David got me through my botany degree that I wasn't going to finish, and he helped me through that experience. Other things people have asked for that map. I've literally got emails and comments of people saying, can you make that map available on your website? So I might catch you offline about that, David, and see if that's ever a possibility. But this is such a great example of the exact things that we're talking about, you know, like this knowledge is in so many people's heads, and I'm hoping this project can be an avenue for people to be able to understand things from different perspectives, from great experts, from people who've lived experience, from all walks of life, whether they're incredible botanists like David and Leon, or people who've been on the land like George and been a ranger and learned how to restore things beyond what anyone else can imagine. All these people have helped shape this project so much, and I hope that it continues to provide people with a connection to these incredible voices. Yeah. Well, I am going to definitely take note of all these sites that you've suggested, and yeah, and it sounds like I need to get to the west. I better get to the west, and you got a pledge from me. You'll be seeing me out west, and if you suggest some people for me to go for a wander with, I'll be very keen. Thank you.
Love it, Ben. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending this time with us today. It was really inspiring.